And a big tender welcome to you.
Where are we? Wow. That's impressive. Brilliant welcome. Amazing to see so many of you. It is really uplifting, particularly for all of us who've done so much work on the campaigning and that. This is a real reward. Welcome to Trago Mills as well, and it's in fact the third time I've been here in the last week, and that's not about any sort of shopping addiction or anything. It's about Trago being so supportive to us, and I've used it as a great resource where I'm meeting so many of my constituents. I've only got 2 minutes, or otherwise a big hook comes and drags me away, so I'm going to keep it very short because we all know why we're really here, and he's waiting in the wings. So Nigel's presence this evening is not only very welcome by the many of you that have turned up, but to all of us around the country who are candidates, but particularly in the southwest. It's given us a real boost of energy. It is a tiring campaign, and many of you have seen us running around the streets and the towns, so it has been a really great lift. We're also making great strides in the southwest with reform, and so much of that is thanks to you guys as well, the ones that are going out there leafleting, the ones that are doing a lot of the footwork for us, the ones that often bringing me cups of tea when they see me in the town. That is so appreciated. We have had a few minor challenges along the way, and only this morning I was reporting on the forum for our candidates that some of our signs have been vandalised and stolen and so on. But in fact, it's actually only served to make us more determined and made us more stronger. And I feel that is really also about them being a little bit worried about us out there. They certainly are. So it's a great privilege standing for Central Devon as a candidate for reform, and we've not slept a lot, but we are looking forward to having a little sleep on the 5th of July after, with your support, we win a lot of seats. So I'm the candidate for Central Devon, but my colleague who's coming on next, Chris Ilditch, who is Newton Abbott, we literally, and we cannot make this up, our party line literally runs through Trago Mills. So he's now coming on. A big hand, please, for Chris Ilditch, Newton Abbott candidate.
Hello, everybody. This is not my water for me, it's for somebody else. Well, thanks, Jeff, for the introduction. I have much to say, but there's a chap coming on in a little while who's got a lot more to say than me, and he's got a rather longer time slot. But I wish to advise that the national polling means absolutely nothing down here in the southwest, because Labour really hardly matters. Maybe in Plymouth a little bit, and in Bristol. And Exeter, now that Ben Branshaw's retired, you can't say. But the Conservatives have gone toxic. We all know that, and that's the truth. So what does that mean for us? Well, I think we'll do very, very well down here, and with the support from people like yourselves, we can sweep the board. So I certainly hope so in Newton Abbott. So in 6 months of running street stall on Saturdays in Newton Abbott and 1 or 2 other places, I've seen 2 issues come forth. The first one is in immigration and all that implies. There's an awful lot of follows on from the immigration. And second is inflation, both utilities and food. In actual fact, my view is that inflation might be dampened, but it's really because nobody can afford to buy anything. And that's obviously going to have a stop on inflation. We in Reform aim to fix these sort of issues, and there's a lot more given the opportunity. Now, allow me to introduce the main event. You've come here to see, not me, sadly, but Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you. Thank you. Amazing. God, goodness me. Do you know, I just walked over that bridge and looked at the canopy of trees, and for a moment, I thought I was back in the Australian jungle. But you know, I have had to deal with one or two snakes over the course of the last few days, and I'll come back to that. At 5 o'clock on Saturday, we didn't have an event. We'd sold 0 tickets. And here we are, less than 2 days later, and we've had to close the gates because we're at capacity. And I tell you what, I know it, I can feel it. Something is happening out there, and it's very, very big indeed. And thank you for coming. Now, one or two of the omens are, I'd say one or two of the omens are quite good. Yesterday was the 23rd of June, a day that I'm never going to forget, a day that you're never going to forget, because it was the 8th anniversary of the first revolt in modern times against the establishment, where we told the Liberal Democrats, we told the Labour Party, we told the Conservative Party, we told the Trade Unions Congress, we told the big employers, the corporates, and the BBC, and the Archbishop of Canterbury. And we ignored them all, and we voted for Brexit. We showed what people power can do. Now, there is no danger of me ever forgetting the date, the 23rd of June, for a second reason. Because yesterday, my first grandson was born. Now, it's been a very odd 48 hours, courtesy of His Majesty's Daily Mail, who have decided that I'm one of the worst people that's ever been born, not for the first time, just because I got up over 10 years ago and said that I felt the eastward expansion of NATO and the European Union would be used by a dangerous dictator as a reason to go to war in Ukraine. I said, don't poke the Russian bear with a stick, because if you do, you'll get a very predictable result. Now, it turns out I was the only person in British public life saying this, and they hated me at the time for daring to do so. Of course, now they hate me even more because I've been proved to be right. And the pile-on has been unbelievable. Somehow, I'm made out to be a Putin apologist, which of course I'm not. What he's done in Ukraine is reprehensible. But some of the reactions amazing, including the Daily Mail's best paid columnist, one Boris Johnson, who said I was morally repugnant for daring to put that view. Well, I tell you what, he didn't like it this morning when I appeared at the Maidstone rally with a life-size print of his comment on the front page of a British newspaper in 2016, in which he said EU expansion had caused the war in Ukraine. They are hypocrites, they are hypocrites, they are cheats, and they are liars. Liars! And this the same Boris Johnson who got an 80-seat majority, and in areas like this, we stood down in 2019. We gave them a free run. We took them at their word, and yet it was Boris Johnson that gave us mass immigration on a scale the country has never seen. It was under Boris Johnson where the boats first started crossing the English Channel. Under Boris Johnson, where his net zero lunacy led him to suggest that up to 30% of British farmland should be rewilded. Now, I suspect this had more to do with Mrs. Johnson than it did with him, or Carrie Antoinette, as she was known, during that time in Downing Street. But I'm being asked by journalists, well, surely Reform standing is going to destroy the chances of the Conservative Party. The answer, folks, is no. They have destroyed their own chances, even without any help from us. But this big row, or confected row, over what caused the Ukraine war, doesn't help any of us, given where we are today. We today are in the most dangerous international position we've been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Remember, the Russians wanted to put nukes in Cuba. America said, if you encroach upon us, we will go to war against you. Funny, isn't it? Rather familiar ring with what I was saying about us encroaching on Russia, but never mind. We now face a Middle East that's on fire. All of Trump's achievements with those Abraham Accords, where he got the Israelis and Arab states to sign up to trade deals, to mutual deals, with Saudi Arabia about to join, they've gone. They've gone with the October 7th attacks. Israel now finds herself increasingly isolated, and we now find pro-Palestinian activists who are allowed to march through the streets of our cities, deface our war memorials, insult our police forces, shout anti-Semitic bile, and we have a police force that stands aside and does absolutely nothing. This country is going down the drain unless we stand up for the right principles. But we also have a massive problem with an expansionist China. China building up, particularly in terms of its navy, claiming strips of land in the South China Sea, and clearly stating its territorial aims on Taiwan. China is a very real threat. Or as a friend of mine in America says, China. China's a threat, the Middle East's on fire, and there is a war going on in Ukraine where something like 0.5 to 1 million men have already been killed or seriously wounded. And what we have to learn from history is that peace comes through strength. It doesn't come through weakness. And I say that to you in a country that since 2010, anyway, go to Plymouth, see what's left of the Royal Navy. It's absolutely pitiful. Look at the number of fighter jets we have. Look at the British Army, now denuded, down from 100,000 people when Cameron came to power to 72,000 men and women today, in the face of the most dangerous world we've ever seen. And in the face of a world where Russia is now linking up with Iran and linking up with China, we face real threats. And yet, the Labour Party have nothing to say. they'll have a defence review, and they might increase defence spending to what is, I think, a very miserable 2.5%. A Labour Party who want to sign up to the European Union's defence union, a union that would have power over procurement, power over policy. A Labour Party led by Keir Starmer who backed Jeremy Corbyn, who wanted us to leave NATO and didn't believe in the existence of the British Army at all. That is what we have with Labour after 14 years of our own services being run down. What we need is reform, because our services are broken. We need reform to be a strong voice in Parliament and in the country to say, firstly, we must rapidly increase defence spending to make sure not only are we strong, but we show to America that we are a worthy NATO ally. We must build up defences and do so very quickly by moving to 3% of GDP. Vital. And whilst we do that, isn't it about time we showed our veteran communities a bit more respect than we currently do? And we would like to see a ministry for Veterans Affairs. There are far too many people who've served in our services through recent wars, living on the streets, suffering horribly with PTSD, and they see some others coming into our country illegally being treated better than those that have given us service. That is not good enough. Not good enough. Not good enough. And we also did a complete rethink on foreign policy. It's the Labour Party with Tory support that took us into a disastrous war in Iraq, a war that cost hundreds of thousands of civilian lives, and a Conservative Party with Labour backing that went in 2012 into Libya. Think of the consequences of that. Before the Libyan war, ISIS didn't even exist. We helped create it. No boats were crossing the Mediterranean before the Libyan war. Now over 2 million have crossed. These are the fundamental foreign policy errors that the Americans have made, or the Democrats have made, and we have followed. And we go on making these same mistakes. And I promise you this, as leader of reform, as leader of our first MPs in Westminster, as leader of what I believe we can build into a mass movement around this country over the course of the next 5 years, with the ambition and intention of winning the 2029 general election. And that's the aim. That's the aim. I promise you that I will always campaign for strong armed forces, strong deterrence, but for me, going to war should always be a last resort and not a first resort, and I will fight and strive for peace as much as I possibly can. But of course, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe them attacking me over what I said 10 years ago, maybe it's a good thing, because at last we're able to have a debate on defence and foreign policy, which thus far has been ignored in what I think is the most vacuous general election in the history of these islands, led by the two most uninspiring middle managers you could ever hope to meet. So let's hope. Well, they don't, but thank you. Let's hope we can have some proper debate about defence and foreign affairs. But of course, for all of them, it's been a wonderful, wonderful way of covering everything up. And I will, by the way, if I have to go on fighting them, I will. If Boris tells any more lies about me, I'll tell the truth about him, all right? But it's all been wonderful cover, because what is going on is we're learning that Sunak's Conservative Party is in fact nothing more than an illegal betting consortium. As now a fifth person has been dragged into the betting scandal, and you can bet your life there are dozens and dozens more involved. And this is all because of their arrogance and their sense of entitlement. Victoria MP saying to me, but you can't stand in the election. There are votes. As if somehow these people have a divine right to votes. I said to Kemi Badenoch at a social event, when she made this point, I said, no, the last person who believed in divine right was King Charles I, and look how that ended. So I really do think we should talk about the big issues. But of course, the one issue they'd rather not discuss is what is happening in the English Channel. I went out there in the spring of 2020, and I went out and I filmed the boats coming. And I said to mainstream media, why are you not covering this story? Because they weren't. They weren't doing it. And I could see it was obvious. Because we'd stopped deporting people, which, by the way, we used to do. Both Labour and Conservative governments would deport those that came illegally. Fairly obvious, you would have thought. But we'd stopped doing it. There's a real running commentary over there. I don't know who he is. But he's terribly good, I tell you that. We'd lost our nerve, and we were bowing down. That wasn't encouragement. We'd lost our nerve, and we become ever more fearful of a court based in Strasbourg. Remember, suspected terrorist Abu Qatada, it took us 10 years to deport him because of the European Court of Human Rights. So I went out there and I said, in 2020, you may as well put a sign on the White Cliffs of Dover, everybody welcome. And then I went and I filmed the hotels that they were being put up in. And I almost single-handedly exposed to the nation what was going on. And I was in real trouble for using a bad word. I used a very bad word on national TV, for which I should hang my head in eternal shame. I said I thought there might be an invasion. Well, how dare I? How dare I? But here we are, 4,000 dinghies and 128,000 people later. I don't know about you, but I think it's fully justified to call what is going on an invasion of our islands. I really do. I really do. And it isn't just the £8 million a day. It isn't just the huge sense of unfairness that it creates for everybody, whether they're born here or whether they came here legally. It's actually far more serious than that. 91% of those that come are men. Most of them young men, dare I say it, of fighting age. Coming from countries in which terrorism is a major problem. Coming directly from war zones in which many of them have been engaged and brutalized. Coming from countries where gang culture rules the waves. And perhaps worst of all, coming from countries in which women are not even treated as second-class citizens. And these people throw their documents into the channel on the 12-mile line. This is a national security crisis. And the Conservatives, Boris, Priti Patel, doesn't matter who it is, Suella Braverman, it's tough to remember them all, there have been so many. Rishi, they promised Rwanda, they promised they'll do this, they promised they'll do that. One of the reasons this election was called early is because Sunak had promised the boats would go in July. He also told us that people were already in detention, remember? Pending these flights. What you won't have heard is that every single one of those people who was detained has now been released on bail, and most have absconded and disappeared into society. No planes will go to Rwanda. We will never solve this problem, all the while we're scared of a court in Strasbourg. And our proposal is we leave the European Court of Human Rights and I will, to try and get, and by the way, this topic, everywhere I've been around the country, everyone's talking about the boats. Such is the sense of growing anger that a country that voted Brexit, a country that voted to take back control of our borders, has clearly not got leaders with the courage to defend them. Tony Abbott, the Australian Prime Minister, did. He stopped the boats going to Australia. We can do the same, but only with the right, courageous leadership that says we will put the interests of our people above the interests of anybody else that comes from the rest of the world. So, and by the way, what does Keir Starmer have to say? We're going to crack down on the gangs. Really? When they're making 3, maybe 4 million euros every week? You could put them all in prison. They'd be replaced by somebody else. After all, we fought a war against the drugs gangs for decades, but to no effect whatsoever. And it's amazing that in the 6-point priority in Sir Keir's manifesto, immigration, legal and illegal, doesn't even get a mention. So the argument's got to be, whether it's on defence, whether it's on foreign policy, whether it's on illegal immigration, or whether it's on legal immigration, which, by the way, the Tories promised, remember, to cut to tens of thousands a year, and it's now running at 750,000 a year. Is it any wonder you can't get a GP appointment? Is it any wonder that rents have risen between 20 and 30% just since 2021? Is it any wonder that our roads are clogged? Is it any wonder that young people have almost no prospect of even getting on the housing ladder and living the life their parents and grandparents were able to do? This should be the immigration election. And I say that knowing that every one of you in this crowd will have friends that have come to our country from other parts of the world. We are an open and welcoming society. We always have been. But it must be a question of numbers. And a population that has risen by 6 million since David Cameron has come to power has made us poorer, has damaged and devalued our quality of life, and there is no prospect of the incoming Labour government, which I guess is what it's going to be, lifting a finger to change it. So whether it's defence, whether it's foreign policy, whatever it may be, who is the best person to provide a voice of opposition to an incoming Labour government? Is it Rishi Sunak? Well, it can't be. He's going to lose his seat and he'll be in California anyway, so it won't be him. But could it be a Conservative Party that is bitterly split and divided, that agrees on nothing? No. I believe if I lead this party in Parliament, and this party as a movement in our country, a movement for real change, a movement that recognises that Britain is broken and that Britain needs reform, real reform, fundamental reform. And that is what we should say to our potential voters. We will be that voice. Now, some will say, you'll never succeed. But then, exactly 30 years ago, I was campaigning on the streets of Eastleigh, a town down near Southampton. It was my first parliamentary by-election as a UKIP candidate. And I was told all through the UKIP years, you're wasting your time, you'll never get anywhere, Britain will never leave the European Union. And of course, they all laughed at me. But as I was able to say in the European Parliament the day after we left, well, you're not laughing now, are you? And that was about getting control of our country back. This is now about whether the way in which we're run is representative of how we think and how we feel. Whether the electoral system by which we send people represents the votes as they're cast. This is now much bigger, much more ambitious than Brexit was, but I feel optimistic we can do a huge amount. I feel optimistic we can move mountains. I feel optimistic we can change history, because I know that the centre of Westminster, be it our political parties or most of our mainstream media, are now more detached from you than they were even before the referendum. And it's why Lee Anderson, the brave Lee Anderson, who we love, Lee Anderson, when he joined Reform, said, I want my country back. And I agree with him, because we're in social decline. You're now allowed to go shoplifting and steal up to £200 worth of goods before they even prosecute you. Young men are carrying knives on our cities and our towns on Friday nights, Saturday nights and more often, and the police don't have the courage to apprehend them and do what they ought to do, which is stop and search. Get knives off our streets. In fact, law and order and crime is getting so bad in our country that we now often don't even bother to report it. We are led by weak people who are happy to see us go into managed decline. And I believe we saw much of that decline in the local elections this year, when for the first time in our lives we saw sectarian voting in England. People voting on purely religious lines. And by the way, when we saw Angela Rayner, who, well, I'll tell you what, she's got more personality than Keir Starmer. Mind you, quite, it'd be very hard not to, wouldn't it? But when we saw Angela Rayner, and there she was, begging Muslim leaders in her constituency to vote for her and not to vote for George Galloway or some independent, there wasn't a single man in the room. This is what mass immigration without assimilation is doing to our society. Our towns and cities are now becoming increasingly divided. And we have a Labour Party coming in who want us all, not that the Tories have done anything to help, but we're all to be categorised. We're all to be divided up according to race or sexual preference or whatever else it may be. And this is all wrong. Everybody should be treated equally before the law with no special privileges. We want a fair, meritocratic society. And that includes those that come in. Good people can come in as long as we can keep the overall level of net migration at zero. But when good people come in, surely to goodness, they should have to work for 5 years, pay their taxes, and obey the law before they receive any taxpayer benefits in our nation. And in line with that, we've got so many people living in poverty, so many people struggling with their fuel bills, so many people who don't even realise the massive bills that are added to their electricity and have been for the last 20 years to fund so-called green projects. Look, I'm all for low carbon output energy, but not if it takes money disproportionately from the poorest in society and hands it to the shareholders of those who are richest in society. And for us to have closed down our steelworks, much of our shipbuilding that we would have seen down the road and elsewhere, much of the oil, much of the gas that we consume is imported. Surely it's better for us to aim to be self-sufficient in these things, to bring jobs back in manufacturing in our country. Surely that's right. So our agenda is unashamedly pro-family. Our agenda is unashamedly pro-communities. Our agenda is unashamedly pro-country. And I tell you what, there's nothing mealy-mouthed about us. We say what we think. We believe in what we say. We don't care at the criticisms we may get from our political class. And I think it's that straightforwardness, it's that passion, it's that belief, which is why the revolt that I called for on June the 4th, when I decided after 4 years of retirement from politics, 4 years of no abuse, 4 years of joy at GB News, 4 years. There's a few GB News fans here, I'm not surprised. Very good. Give us a wave if you like GB News. 4 years of going back and forth to America, visiting Mar-a-Lago, giving speeches, 4 years of making money, 4 years of not having to work at weekends, 4 years of enjoying life. But on the 4th of June, I gave it all up to come back as leader of Reform UK and to lead a political revolt in this country, and we'll see the first major effect of that on July the 4th this year. And my commitment to you is that I'm going to do this for at least the next 5 years. I believe we can get millions of people signed up to this movement, millions of people that want British values to be re-established, millions of people who don't want our kids being poisoned at school and university, being told our country is the worst country that ever existed. Let's get some pride back in our past. And I was so honoured to be able to join that campaign to help raise £100,000 to send 17 World War II veterans back to Normandy for June the 6th, just a few weeks ago. I was proud to do that. And to honour the last remnants of that generation of whom I think we're all, aren't we, so very, very proud. Very proud. But to think that 50% of under 30-year-olds have never heard of D-Day, but will tell you all about how terrible the British Empire was, how we're the only country ever to have engaged in slavery, shows you what I mean. We need a new positive attitude about who we are today, where we come from, and where we want to go as a country and as a people. Let's stand up tall and be proud of our values, our nation, and who we are. Let's do that. And I'm sure you've all seen the film, The Longest Day. Wonderful film. Rishi Sunak was there on June the 6th. He's made a new version. It's called The Shortest Day, which in many ways sums these people up. They really are career politicians. They really are for rank, title, position, as opposed to any strong-based political or even emotional belief. I'm not doing this for rank or title or position. I'm not doing this for fame. I've got far too much of that already. Well, infamy perhaps. And I'm certainly not doing this for money, because I'll make a damn sight more money not doing it. I'm doing this, and I used to say, up until 10 o'clock last night, I used to say, I'm doing this for my 4 children. But I need to add one onto that now, don't I? And say I'm doing it for a grandchild as well. I want to say a huge thank you for turning up today in such fantastic numbers. I can sense and feel the energy, the enthusiasm, the optimism that is here. I know it. It's real. Can you feel it as well? It's real. And we've got 10 days to go, and we are on the up. We're lying in second position. That is an amazing achievement in a short space of time. But Labour are still well ahead. But here, in the West Country, there are many constituencies in which the Conservative vote will collapse, the Liberal Democrat vote will go up, the Labour vote, as part of the national swing, will go up, and already, in most of these seats, we're finding Reform in a big position. Many of these seats will be decided in Devon and elsewhere by literally a couple of 100 votes either way. And I think you're going to find we're in the mix. We're in the mix in some of these seats. I can't tell you what will happen. We're going to get a massive vote. But there's nothing to stop us winning a couple of these seats. But to do it, we need to maintain that momentum. We need to maintain that conversation. So let me ask you, are you prepared to do your bit? Are you prepared to join our People's Army? Are you prepared to join our revolt against the establishment? And will you go out for the next 10 days, talk to people, help us in any way you can so that we can get our first MPs in the West Country elected? Well, in that case, I conclude by saying thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before you go, I just want to invite all the candidates from Devon, Dorset, Somerset, Cornwall who are here up on stage so you lot can see who you'll be voting for. So come on, you guys, come up on stage. Come on, candidates.